On Monday, the auditorium at the Kavango East Regional Council attracted quite a number of people, including the youth. Now, they were very eager to hear what this policy means, especially for them. The Petroleum Commissioner, Maggie Shino, said that she actually wants to see the wealth obtained from oil and gas trickle into people's homes. She wants to observe it in the clinics and in the hospitals. And the young people had quite a lot to say about this. Now, this morning, I'm joined by Mitch Mwatuli, the national spokesperson for the National African Students Association. Mr. Mwatuli, how did you find the engagement on the policy focusing on oil and gas yesterday?
I would say the event yesterday, or the policy engagement, it was quite engageful because they presented their aspect, they presented the policy, they presented their current progress, and it was given back to the community, to the local authorities, to the township government, and as well as the youth, to give in their input. So it was quite engageful because the youth, the community, and the people that were present gave in their inputs, and then it was deliberated on. There were questions back and forth, there were answers, and yeah, it was quite engageful. There were some recommendations made, so yeah, it was very engaging.
Right. Was there anything in particular that stood out for you?
I would say the most thing that stood out for me, it was, I think it's the board or the committee, the way they approve the drilling companies, or the criteria on how they approve these drilling companies. Because they said you need to meet two criteria. You need to meet two criteria to be approved for drilling. Number one, which is the technical part, and then the number two, which is the financial aspect. The technical part, that means you need to have the resources, the equipment, and the necessary human capital to do this work, and then the financial to cover for the cost that comes with the drilling process. So mostly I would say this was my biggest takeaway, because you'll find to it that our local community, not a lot of businesses will qualify to participate in drilling. So they might end up being employed by international companies, but majority would not be our local companies that would be drilling these boreholes. So it's quite a bit hazy.
Right. Okay, they had presentations actually yesterday. NAMCO was there talking about the general petroleum sector in Namibia. And then I think the upstream petroleum unit as well, they also presented. What were your takeaways on those presentations?
I would say my takeaway from those presentations was when it comes to the upstream, you would find to it that their presentation mainly focuses on the part where they have a board that approves, like I said. So from their aspect, it would look as if majority of these companies, or almost all of these companies that are participating in the drilling and the exploration and the expeditions for oil and gas in Namibia, are international companies. So this leaves some kind of question to say that if they did really do these kind of studies, yeah, I understand the country currently has priority in different sectors. That's why they are trying to seek for external. But I feel like a local company would still do just as fine with a little bit of push from the government. Alternatively, but it was still a good presentation. It was a good presentation, to say.
Okay, you were actually one of the people that stood up yesterday, and you raised a point. Let's talk about what you spoke about yesterday.
So my main point yesterday was on the TVET, or NTA. Um, you'll find it that I gave an example yesterday to say, in comparison to oil and gas, I was comparing it to hydrogen. Hydrogen is also still in its development phase, but you'll find it when they came here also and they did their consultation, it was an aspect of them asking that who can be employed by them and whatnot. So you'll find to it that our current VTCs do not produce the higher level, or the higher qualification levels for these people to be able to be employed on this. Yes, some of them will be employed, but even I gave an example of, if somebody had to work, they'll tell you, no, we need somebody who's qualified to work on an oil rig. your level 5 degree or your level 5 qualification from VTC does not qualify you to work on these kind of spaces on their plantation, or in this case they are all rigs. It wouldn't qualify you because the level is not up to standard.
Would you say your question was answered?
I would say my question was not directly answered. Matter of fact, I would say my example was dismissed to say that hydrogen is not a similar comparison to oil and gas, which I kind of understood from her point of view, dismissing that. But still, I would say that it would be very, it would be very uh, our recommendation was to say that after those questions were not answered, we gave in a recommendation to say that, okay, rather now, instead of these people failing to employ our communities, why should they not come up with an advisory board to, to, to advise the Ministry of Higher Education to implement high-level qualifications so that these people can also participate or compete with the national competition that's currently there, because it will not only be Namibia to say. Yeah.
All right. What were some of the other points raised by the other young people that were there?
I think the other person who spoke before me mentioned a point to say that if Namibia's GDP is currently standing at roughly 13.5 billion US dollars, you would say, and these guys say to drill one borehole, to drill one well would cost them roughly, in the ocean, in the sea, it would cost them roughly 100 million US dollars. So if they drill about 10 or 20 boreholes, this is a rough estimate of about 1 to 2 billion 1 to 2 billion US dollars. So you'll find that they are saying we don't have this money to bring into our company, so they expect foreign investment. And then foreign investment comes, our GDP spikes instantly up and then instantly drops back to constant. Why is that? It spiked by roughly maybe 7 to 20% up and then it went back down. So this happens because at the end of the day, money came into the country in claims that it's investment towards the oil and gas activities in the company in Namibia. Yes, it will reflect, yes, it will spike our GDP, but at the end of the day, a week later, a month later, it's back to constant. Why is that? It's because this money is being spent on international employment, it's being spent on international equipment, rather than this money being employed on the country to be able to build and to upscale their standards so that they can internally produce. So the money comes spent externally to acquire equipment, to acquire working capital, and so forth. So at the end of the day, if we are to ask if all these oil and gas companies were to leave the shores and the explorations, after all the billions or millions of US dollars that were invested in this, what would be left for Namibia? It would look as if there was never any action happening, because the investment came in, but it paid out elsewhere. It did not pay out in the country. Yeah.
Interesting. What were other perceptions by young people there?
I'd say the other perception by young people, it was that the policy is a good policy. It's a good policy in terms of it's implementable, it's justified, but despite that, we feel like it's a bit delayed. It comes in, it comes into play very slow. Because, for example, we said the point I said about TVET and implementing courses that will enable our communities to participate directly into the oil and gas sector. They are saying they are in consultation with NTA to implement higher qualification levels at VTCs. They said they established together with NAST a number of courses directly in the oil and gas, and they're also saying they are also in talks with UNAM. But if you also consider the fact that they mentioned that prior the start or prior the implementation of this the exploration in the oil and gas sector, they said they did a study to see what's more feasible. Do we have this necessary capital? If they did that study, why was these implementations not done earlier, so that when these companies start exploring, people are instantly employed because they now qualify prior the study done, then the courses are implemented, that's how things are supposed to logically follow each other. Instead of you say you did a study, the companies come, then you want to implement the courses. By the time people are done with these courses, for example, Recon Africa, by the time people were done with the qualifications that Recon Africa recommended to these people, Recon Africa was closed down. It was paused. It's on a pause as is currently. So there is no exploration. So these people went, did 2 to 3 year courses. Now they are back in the streets. Why? Because the company is no more employing. Why is that? Because they did a previous drill and now they are still also gathering funds to do another expedition. We don't know when that will be. That's why we are saying it was supposed to follow some kind of sequence.
Anything else you'd like to add?
At this point, I would say we as the youth, we perceive this policy as it's a good policy, like I said. It's just that we'd like to see the advisory board come up, especially to the NTA, to the Ministry of Higher Education, so that these courses can be implemented, not only in the oil and gas sector, also for hydrogen. It's also coming up. Mind you, currently oil and gas as well as hydrogen, that's the discovery of the century for Namibia. So it's high time we say this board comes up from these different institutions. They could have a board from the oil and gas so that they recommend specific courses that we don't need to travel outside the country, so that they are so costly that a lot of people need a sponsorship. So they could come up with this board that advises NTA to increase their levels, and also they could assist, because you'll find majority from VTCs, they are doing more theoretical work rather than practical, which is unlikely, which is not supposed to be that way at VTCs. VTCs, you're supposed to have the necessary equipment for you to practice on it because it's practical work. And also the implementation of this course should also be extended to universities like UNAM, NAST, IUM, and so forth. We are saying this because we want to see people move from the sector where we are training thousands of teachers. We are training thousands of teachers, but at the end of the day, those teachers are not employed, because what's booming is attracting international employment, living on our own community because they do not qualify to participate in these sectors. We don't want to benefit indirectly, we want to benefit directly as well.